Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. This is a Ukraine war breaking news update. Well, it's kind of a European geopolitics breaking news update concerning the vote in Moldova. This is super important because Moldova is very much in the sphere of influence of Russia, and there's been there's a first round of the presidential election that sort of sorted out the wheat for the chaff. So you had all the candidates in, and the top two were taken to a second round of votes, and then you'd vote on the top two. But at the same time, you had the European referendum, the EU referendum, whereby voters were also voting on whether they should accede to the EU, if at all possible, etc., etc. And by the narrowest of margins, they got through that vote. And indeed, it was the same trajectory, really, that we saw today with the Moldovan second round presidential vote, and what we'll likely see in the US election as well, actually, to some degree, which is where the rural, smaller areas get counted first. And you think, oh my goodness. And then as the larger urban, more liberal votes come in, so those areas of densely populated urban environments whereby you have a lot more ballots to count, they get sort of dumped. You get these bigger dumps that happen later, and then they are counted later. And actually there is a skew from going from the right wing to the left wing as the day literally goes on, as the counting goes on. This is quite common. You see it in a lot of places. It's happened in previous US elections. It happened in the last election. That led to questions about vote dumping or ballot dumping and cheating, right? But actually, it's just a natural way that it often happens, whereby your rural counties or districts or whatever get counted first, and it skews towards the right wing because rural areas are generally more right wing and traditionalist than your urban environments that have huge amounts of kind of integration of immigration and huge spectrum of people, and that usually breeds liberalism and acceptance, whereas rural areas are more traditionalist, bucolic, etc., etc. Anyway, I don't want to get into the rural-urban divide, but there you go. So we talked about this morning when I was referring to this Moldovan analyst here, or source, Derek Tainus, talking about exactly that. He said, look out for that. That is what will happen. And we went through some of the tweets on his thread. Well, actually, we'll join that halfway kind of through the day, where there was lots of controversy going on in Moscow. One of the diaspora polling stations ran out of ballots, and there were bomb threats on the border into Moldova. Some people claiming that was Russians doing that, other people claiming the other way. Typical chaos that you would expect when Russia is getting involved with trying to manipulate electorates. But the reality was that initially, as you can see from this infographic here, slightly over 1 million votes counted, and this was sort of 8-10 p.m. It's now 11:43 my time, so that's a good 4 hours ago, plus 5 hours. Well, I don't know, a long time ago. Slightly over 1 million votes counted, and the pro-Russian candidate leads by a slight margin. Actually, it was larger than that previously, and then that margin was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, to the point where actually people were calling it for Maia Sandu, even though she was behind, because you knew that it was the urban areas coming in later, and then the diaspora votes that, aside from Belarus and Moscow, the votes around Europe, where you actually have quite a lot of Moldovan diaspora communities, they were going to very heavily favour the Maia Sandu vote, as you would imagine, as a pro-EU candidate, the Western-facing candidate. She's going to receive a lot more votes from inside Europe, from diaspora communities there that favour her, because they've gone to Europe, they're going to favour Europe, etc., etc. You got Alexander Stoyanoglu, who is kind of pro-Russian, but at least still, gave lip service to joining the EU. He was for accession to the EU, but really strong relationships with Russia still. So that was his positioning. And in the end, 3 hours ago, Derek Taylor said, "I'll jump the gun and just call it. Despite the God knows how many hundreds of millions of dollars Russia spent on overturning this, Maia Sandu will win the race by a safe margin." 2 hours ago, Maia Sandu melted the difference and is now in the lead. There are some 250,000 votes left to be counted, nearly all coming from Moldovan diaspora, roughly 80% pro-Sandu diaspora communities. And with that, I'll end this never-ending thread. Thank you for putting up with too many tweets. And basically, Maia Sandu has won the election, which is really good news, because where we saw Georgia going towards Russia and rigging the election, actually Moldova were able to hold that off, and the vote has come through. And it's not a huge margin, but it is significant considering the amount of money and effort that Russia has put into to upsetting that election. So Maia Sandu has said 49 minutes ago, "Moldova, today you are victorious. Together we've shown the strength of our unity, democracy and commitment to a dignified future. Thank you, dear Moldovans, at home and abroad. Walk with pride. You are freedom, hope and resilience. I'm proud to serve you all," which is absolutely fantastic. And lots of people obviously reporting all of this. Tendar saying Moldovan President Maia Sandu has won the second and final round of the presidential elections. She's leading by almost 7 percentage points in the end, which is a really large margin considering how close it was, with only what seemed like relatively few votes to count. But again, that margin really switches. The overwhelmingly large proportion of those late ballots counted were Maia Sandu, and of course that's what leads people to come up with all sorts of conspiracy theories. That's what we saw in the 2020 election in the US, but it's just not, is simply explicable by your standard voting practices and where the later votes come from, and the fact that they take longer to count, etc., etc. So with 96.9% of all counted votes, she can't be overtaken by her opponent, even when he gets, or if he is to get all the remaining votes. So that's what Tendar announced over an hour ago. The Russian influence and infiltration campaign didn't pay off, and Moldovans have chosen a path to the West and the EU. Congratulations, Maia Sandu. I saw someone saying earlier on, I think it might have been Tim White actually, saying, the West won, Russia nil. No, I'd say the West won, Russia won, because Russia took Georgia recently, and it's going to be interesting to see what the response is there from the Georgian people, with protests possibly starting tomorrow. Hopefully in Moldova there'll be no protests from the Russian side of the coin there. That I think there were these coaches that were stopped going into Moldova that were full of the kind of Russian thugs, if you like, that are often seen around. Well, we saw them in Georgia. We saw them in Euromaidan protests back 10 years ago in Ukraine. So hopefully we won't get that in Moldova. It'll be just a peaceful next week or so, and going forward, hopefully Moldova has taken the right path there, the path of democracy. Free and fair elections, Western facing, looking for transparency, democratic values, and checking all the boxes to join the EU. Whether that happens or not, and over what time frame, I don't know. It's not going to be quick. I mean, we're talking about being very surprised if, say, Ukraine were to accede to the EU before 2030. So this is going to be 5 years plus away, I would have thought. But it's doing all those things in order to accede to the EU, jumping through those hoops and ticking those boxes, which are all good for transparent democracies and shaking off the legacy of corruption and Soviet era kind of politics and culture, such that the country of Moldova, the Republic of Moldova, benefits. So really good news. I think we should be happy that has happened, because I do get worried at how successful Russia is becoming at upsetting the apple cart all around the world, and it's so difficult to maintain democracies. It just takes a lot of hard work, really does, and the will of people to overcome all the challenges, all the hurdles placed in their way by bad faith actors and regimes that want to stop democracies. So this is it is so easy to lose a democracy. It's so difficult to get them back or to find them in the first place. So we shouldn't we shouldn't underestimate how important this is. It is incredibly important. So well done, Moldova. Awesome news. Anyway, I've got some American election videos to go on with, but I thought that would be an important thing to tell you. Of course, most of you probably already knew, but anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. Please like, subscribe, and share if you haven't already subscribed. Please do so, and if you do, press the bell button and select all instead of personalized for notifications, and that helps as well, apparently. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.